Kia ora whānau, how's it going? It's Lewai Takahu here. Great to be back together again on this Word of Monday, the last Monday before we celebrate Christmas and the season of giving and receiving of gifts. It was awesome yesterday to have the young people in our church reenact the Christmas story, and in particular the birth and worshipping of Jesus. I just want to firstly remind us that we're in a season of giving and receiving and going to people and catching up with family and being around others in whom we love. Can I just remind us, in the midst of all the busyness, cooking the food, maybe doing a barbecue or traveling and whatever we're doing, that we just remember those that have lost their loved ones this year in our church community and around the places that wherever you find yourselves. Also remember those who are single, those who are widowed in our communities. If you know them, maybe give them a ring and also wish them well as well. We are the Church of God, and we're the people of God, and part of our celebrating and remembering is we're to welcome all people and to encompass all peoples in that sense. So if you've got a combat buddy in our church situation whom you know doesn't have family that can meet up with, then maybe you just give them a call or invite them over at some time over this period of time to catch up. We've got a Christmas barbecue and carols on Christmas Eve, so everyone's welcome to that, and we can join in just being together and encouraging each other. Also, I'm going to be doing a series over January called Starting Again, and looking at new beginnings. So things like, for example, on the second day of the new year, in the beginning, I'm going to just do a little about both John and the Genesis account. Then I'll look at new identity, call for a purpose, a line for assignment over the January period. And so do join us either on the Sundays or on Zoom when we can talk about it. Online here. You can join in with us and share in those messages. Today I just want to reflect on what we saw yesterday with the Christmas story in relationship to some little things you may not know or see in relationship to the birth scene. Because we can look over these things. We see the birth as the main element, but there are actually some prophetic statements as the Gospels record. And the one that I'm going to look at firstly is in Matthew. Today is look at Matthew's account of Jesus, who he is, and in particular what the wise men give as an offering of worship. It's actually foretelling something. It's telling something about the future, which is prophetic. It's a prophetic testimony of who Jesus is. And if we actually miss it, we miss the ongoing story of what Jesus' narrative is. It's actually not the baby that's the key point in relationship to the birth scene and the Mary scene, although it's important. And it's not Mary, it's not Joseph, it's not the shepherds or the angels and so forth, although they are important for our tradition and season. It's actually the prophetic and the prophecy that's come in that birth and the symbols that are in there that actually point to a greater gift that's about to come. And the first one I want to look at is the gifts that the wise men give and pay homage to Mary and Joseph and Jesus. In Matthew 2, verses 11, on coming to the house, they saw the child was with Mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Here are wise men whom were probably at the height of their career in relationship to the ability to read star signs and to see into the things that centuries ago their ancestor Daniel had trained them how to do. How to read this time, signs and seasons through the stars. All that history from Daniel's time and even further back to, starts with Joseph and his ability to interpret dreams. But more importantly, when Daniel was taken captive up into Babylon and that evil empire, that corrupt society, that demon of a king, yet Daniel stayed faithful to his God, and in doing so, he developed this culture of understanding the seasons and times, as it's recorded in Genesis 1:17, that the stars were given not firstly for the lights and that, but they were there for a purpose. They were there for giving us to know the times and seasons. They were there for a sign to us. And so this culmination of Daniel's teaching is now on these wise men. These wise men had come to the pinnacle of what they had been reading and interpreting in the stars. And they're worshipping at him. They're actually worshipping at the one who created the stars, who was there in the beginning, which we'll talk about. But look at what they give them. Look at the gifts. Then they opened the treasures and presented the gifts to him of gold and incense and myrrh. The incense and myrrh is a prophetic statement. What do you see that happens at Jesus' death? They bring incense and myrrh and these perfumes, these ceremonial perfumes. So here at the birth of who Jesus is, these ceremonial incenses are given to him as a prophetic statement about what is to come. His life is going to lead to death. His life is going to lead to the path of death. Now, maybe later on when we read in Luke's account, where the writer of Luke, or Luke the writer, says that Mary stored all these things up in her heart. And maybe this is one of those things. Maybe she saw them and go, oh, this pathway is different. The son of mine, whom the angels said would come, is a different pathway. But for us, if we miss it, we miss the point of part of the giftings here that were given over, was these gifts were leading to a path of death. I remember going to Afghanistan, and so it's in the Middle East there, and when we went to water troughs or places where the animals were fed, they weren't in wooden troughs like you have in the West. They were either rocks built around into an area, a feeding area, or with hard clay that's been built up around it. And some scholars would, and they would live in caves. And so where in Bamiyan province, where the statue of the Buddhas were, alongside the walls of the cliffs, you'll see these caves, and that's where the people lived. So in ancient Israel, there are some that would say that this house that Jesus was living in wasn't a house like we would understand in a Western culture, but rather a compound where parts of it would have been in a cave, and often that's where the animals would be. And in that cave, they would have a feeding trough, and that feeding trough will be made out of a rock. And so here is Jesus laid on a rock that the animals would feed from, and in doing so, it was in a rock. This idea that Jesus is the rock. And later on, Peter talks about this, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus replied to him, on this rock I'll build my church. You know, the Catholic Church have got it wrong. It's not Peter who's the rock. It's that statement. It's the statement that Jesus Christ is the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And in Jesus' birth, the coming is important of him, because in Matthew's account we see this idea of Jesus as part of a legacy. He's part of a story. And in the first chapter of Matthew records his whakapapa, right back to the first Adam. Each successive generation, the unfolding work of God's plan is coming to fruition. And you see these main characters all the way through to the time of Jesus when he is born. He's part of that salvation story. He's part of God's plans that he's been threading through history, throughout the world. And now it's culminated. Those who have practiced the ability to read the signs and understand the seasons have come to Bethlehem. The angels are worshipping. Everything is culminating on this time and point of time in the history. We're in a cave, laid on a rock, with incense given. The rock that will break this world. The rock that's the foundation to the world. And incense that is given as a sign of a pathway to death. In the first Adam, he ate the apple from the tree, consumed it. Knowing that he stole the apple, he couldn't return it back to the tree. But in the second Adam, he lays himself on the tree. He returns the fruit back to the Father on our behalf. The pathway of death that Jesus lays before us. And you know what? If you strip away Mary and Joseph and the shepherds and the animals, and you actually take Jesus out, what's left on that feeding trough is his cloth, the shroud. You take Jesus away, and left is the shroud that Jesus was wrapped in. And you jump down 30 years when the stone was rolled away and the disciples walked in. All they saw was the shroud of Jesus. He was no longer there. Jesus, at his birth, there was prophecy about him that this man was on the pathway to death, the sign of the incense, that this man would offer himself as the second Adam, the first fruits of redemption, for which Adam, the first one, couldn't do, but he has done. Jesus is the offering of salvation to all who believe in him. Those who don't believe in him stand condemned. They condemn themselves as Scripture unfolds. But you and I, in our time, why do we have time? Why is there time given to us? Time is the gift of salvation. It's a redemptive process that we all live through. We can make mistakes, we can fall over, we can trip over, and we can help others, and all these things that we do in life. We give a season and time to live, an opportunity to come to the Father and say, God, I'm sorry that I've sinned against you and your Son and all of humanity and all the things. I'm sorry that I've sinned. I ask for forgiveness. Forgive me for my sin, my transgressions, and the sins of iniquity. Cleanse me from all unrighteousness. Father, I take on the gift of your Son, Jesus Christ, the offering that he gives us today. And therefore, I deny myself, pick up the cross, and follow you. Well, whānau, just some small glimpses about the birth of Jesus. There's prophetic statements, prophetic symbols, and the offering of the gift the feeding trough, and the shroud that wrapped him on that first day, symbolic of the shroud that'll be left in the empty tomb. Jesus is alive. He is King of Kings. He's sitting on the throne. Despite what's going on around us, he is alive and he is risen. Lord bless you and keep you. May his face continually shine upon you over this next week. Keep safe, whānau. Be of courage. Stand up for righteousness. Stand up for holiness. Press into the Lord, and he will be found. Jeremiah 33:3. Call on me, and I will tell you things that you do not know. And Matthew 5 and 6. Seek first the kingdom of God and its righteousness, and all these things will be given to you. So whānau, have a great week. Have a blessed time with your families. For those of you who don't have families, we're going to be meeting here on Sunday as well. So we're just going to have a short service together so we can have fellowship and a catch up. If you're in Kaikohe on the Sundays over January, 10 o'clock on the corner of Broadway and Hongi Street, we meet together. We're not asking for your passports. It's not my responsibility to make sure that you're healthy. That's your own responsibility. But just do know that we will be following the guidelines from the government relationship to our numbers. So we'll be just keeping an eye on that. But you're most welcome to join us. The Lord bless you and keep you. Again, may his face continue to shine upon you over this time. God bless whānau. Have a great day.